In the blistering summer of 1942, the fate of the Middle East hung on a razor-thin line. Standing just 60 miles west of Alexandria, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Panzer Army Africa prepared for a final decisive blow. Historically, the desert sands of El Alamein became Rommel's graveyard. But what if the Desert Fox had achieved his ultimate tactical dream, breaking through the British Eighth Army and routing them into the Nile Delta? To contemporary observers, a breakthrough at El Alamein seemed like the end of British rule in Egypt, seemingly opening the gates to the Suez Canal and the priceless vast oil reserves of the Middle East. The capture of Cairo and Alexandria would have triggered immense panic in London and Washington, forcing the British Mediterranean fleet to abandon its historic deep water base and flee south toward the Red Sea. Yet this brilliant tactical triumph would immediately bring the Axis forces face to face with an inescapable reality. Bypassing El Alamein only pushed Rommel's panzers into the swampy, waterlogged terrain of the Nile Delta. The Nile Delta, with its endless irrigation ditches and muddy agricultural fields, was a nightmare for rapid mechanized maneuvers, forcing Rommel's forces into a slow, grinding and resource-depleting infantry struggle. Beyond the Nile lay the ultimate physical barrier between Africa and Asia, the Suez Canal. Spanning over 100 miles of deep, saltwater channel, it was a formidable barrier guarded by British artillery. To cross the canal, Rommel required specialized amphibious equipment, heavy bridging trains, and assault boats. But none of these resources were available, completely hogged by the massive German campaigns on the Russian front. Any improvised crossing attempt using local civilian rafts would have been easily destroyed by British naval patrols operating in the Bitter Lakes, supported by the absolute aerial superiority of the Royal Air Force. Executing a comprehensive scorched earth policy, the British would have thoroughly destroyed every bridge, ferry, and lock system along the canal, sinking massive block ships to block the waterway for years. Even if a small Axis spearhead managed to cross the Suez, they would face the forbidding wilderness of the Sinai. This 300-mile desert possessed no water, no roads, and no natural cover. Under the blistering sun, Rommel's supply lines would stretch to an absolute breaking point. His main logistical base at Tripoli lay over 1,400 miles behind him, a distance that devoured more fuel than it delivered. Logistics in the desert was a game of hard mathematics. To march across the Sinai, Rommel's truck columns would have to transport every single gallon of drinking water necessary to keep his men and draft animals alive. The ultimate strategic prize lay over 1,200 miles east of the Suez Canal, the legendary Abadan oil refinery on the Persian Gulf, the largest petroleum refinery in the entire world. But the British had prepared a devastating defense. Under the Middle East oil denial scheme, specialized Royal engineers were trained to systematically destroy every oil well, pipeline, and refinery in the region. By cementing the wellheads, destroying the drill rigs, and burning the refineries, the British would leave behind nothing but a useless, toxic wasteland, yielding virtually no usable petroleum for years to come. The Axis powers lacked the specialized engineering equipment, pipelines, and tankers to rebuild this infrastructure from scratch under constant Allied aerial bombardment, rendering the oil prize completely useless. Over 40% of Rommel's cargo vehicles were already permanently sidelined due to a total lack of spare parts and replacement tires, making it physically impossible to supply an offensive over thousands of miles. Every mile the panzers drove further east only increased their vulnerability. Their overextended supply line, relying on a single coastal road, was exposed to continuous devastating air and naval attacks. Crucially, the British island fortress of Malta remained a deadly thorn in the Axis side. Operating from Malta, Allied submarines and aircraft sank over 40% of the supply ships carrying fuel to North Africa. Stripped of fuel and ammunition, Rommel's forces would have found themselves trapped in a giant logistical cul-de-sac, surrounded by a resurgent British Empire and a massive, newly arrived American army in their rear. Instead of securing victory, a drive across the Suez Canal would have accelerated the complete collapse of the Axis southern flank, trapping the entire Panzer Army Africa in an encirclement far worse than Tunisia. This early operational catastrophe would have shattered Italy's defense years ahead of schedule, opening the soft underbelly of Axis Europe to an immediate direct Allied invasion as early as 1943. In the final quantitative analysis, Rommel's drive on the Suez Canal was nothing more than a magnificent, desperate mirage, proving that in total war, the unyielding mathematical laws of logistics will always prevail.